Tell us about the music scene in Copenhagen when you first became interested in music.
When I moved to Copenhagen, I was already very interested in music. I've been playing classical piano all my childhood and also when I was young, and also being in some choirs and singing, and I also played guitar at some point. But right when I moved to Copenhagen, I started studying literature at the university, and then I was playing on the side, you could say. And I had started playing flute, like that flute. I think, I don't know why, because I had a piano the first place I lived. I think maybe it was because I was traveling to South America with my boyfriend at that time for 3 months. After that was nearly in the middle of the study at the university, and at that point I already felt that I needed to get away from the university, and I also felt maybe that the music was, pulling me towards it. And when I came back from Peru, we were backpacking in Peru mostly. I felt that I missed the music so much, so I had to quit the literature study and apply or go to the audition for music at the university, and which I did, and I came in there. And at the same time, I bought a saxophone, a soprano saxophone. And why was it a soprano saxophone? That's a little odd, because most people start with alto or tenor. I think I was a big fan of John Coltrane, of course, also his soprano playing, and Wayne Shorter. And maybe I felt that was most accessible for me, coming from the flute. So that was my entry into saxophone, at least, and also improvised music. And the scene was, how can I say, it was in the 80s. There were a lot of experiments going on. And there was also a big group of musicians playing more straight-ahead jazz. I was more in the experimental groups, and luckily John Chikai was around, living in close to Copenhagen at that time, and he was also my first teacher in the way that not so much in saxophone playing, but I had met him at a music camp. Then one of the other participants in that camp said, "Why don't you join our Sunday evenings with John Chikai? Because we meet. There was a group of young musicians who would meet every Sunday in a loft, and John would come, and we would play or do weird things together. Like it could also end up in literally a performance, or everybody dancing, or John would bring a tune sometimes, or some ideas for improvisation. And then we would play a couple of hours, and then we would sit down afterwards and drink a lot of tea, and John would be sharing all his stories and his wisdom and knowledge about music and other things. But then he moved out of Denmark, and I got some other teachers, and I also gradually dropped out of my music studies at the university, because that part of jazz and improvised music I was interested in, I realized I couldn't learn there. So I'm also self-taught a lot and have found my own teachers, you could say.
Okay. Who did you play with throughout the years?
In the whole from start to now, or yeah, well, that would be a very long interview. But if we take from when I was very young, John was of course important to me, and later I have been working with him in different constellations or situations. Then I also came into Marilyn Masur, had an all-female group called Primi Band, which I think I joined that when I had only played saxophone 1 year or so, and also started to play tenor. But that was also, how can I say, there was a lot of dance and a lot of percussion. Everybody played percussion besides their own instrument. I think we were around 10, 12 people in it. And that came to mean a lot to me. I have had some bands and been member of a lot of bands from Denmark and also some other Scandinavian collaborations when I was in my 20s and into 30s. What became important for the way my music took was a trio with electric bass player Peter Friis Nielsen and guitar player Hasse Poulsen. We made a trio, and which was only about free improvisation. We made a lot of sessions and also listened to a lot of music, and also a lot of European improvised music, which I kind of knew, but maybe mostly the Scandinavian at that time. And then I became more aware of how much there was going on in Central Europe, which at that time very seldom was performed, or that it would be very seldom that there were groups from Central Europe performing in Copenhagen at least. That trio made collaborations with different musicians like Peter Brøtzmann on one tour, and also other musicians that's gone right now. But I think I slowly started to get into playing with more, also in some Scandinavian groups. Sten Sandell, a piano player, got to know the trio Gosh, which was Mats Gustafsson, Sten Sandell and Raymond Strid. And I'll say, and then that led into a collaboration with still a Scandinavian group, but also with including Marilyn Crispell. And her I worked with also, both in the States and Canada and different places in Europe for a period. That collaboration, how can I say, it transformed into another trio, which was with Gerald Cleaver and Craig Taborn, which we also worked a number of years, and I hope we will again. And then it has just spread. I say from the States, I would mention Sylvie Courvoisier, Iko Emori, and a lot of different people from over here. And I also have different groups, or I am member of different groups and constellations of musicians in Europe. and maybe the last years there has been for me a focus on musicians from Berlin, which have maybe a bit different approach to improvisation, which has been interesting for me because I'm also composing and especially working with where composition meet improvisation, which it can do in many ways.
Okay, you and Thur Larsen,
Yeah.
are co-leaders of the Copenhagen Art Ensemble. What can you tell us about that, about the Copenhagen Art Ensemble?
Copenhagen Art Ensemble, first of all, it doesn't exist anymore. I think it must have started gradually in around 96, as I remember. I think one of the first projects, you could say, that group, Copenhagen Art Ensemble, was a bigger group or a larger ensemble. It was not a big band, but there were a lot of horns and rhythm section and sometimes guests. And we worked with many guest composers and guest musicians also. As I remember, in 96, we did a project with Django Bates, a British piano player and composer. Then some years later, we also did a really nice project with Tim Byrne and Tim's music. And for that occasion, Tim also brought Herb Robertson, a trumpet player from here, and Marc Ducret, a French guitar player. And then we have done projects with string quartets and a lot. I have also been writing for that group, and there have been many different, also new music composers. Mats Gustafsson have been doing a project, and yeah.
There are a lot of female musicians in Denmark. Can you comment on that? Why is that? Is there a reason, or is it coincidence?
I think there are a lot of female musicians, especially in improvised music in all of Scandinavia. And I also see more and more in the rest of Europe, or especially in, the rest of Europe. Not every country, but it's growing for sure. I'm not sure if it's right what I'm saying. I have the feeling that Scandinavia has been quite ahead of equality and being conscious about it, and also in the way you raise kids, especially. Then, of course, I mean, in Denmark there have been a musician and composer like Marilyn Masur. She has meant a lot to younger musicians. I know. I've heard that I also have been inspirational for some younger musicians, and I think it's the same in both Sweden and Norway. Has also had some female musicians that were, how can I say, active quite early. Besides that, I don't know. I can say that in all three countries, but maybe especially in Sweden and Norway, nowadays they are very conscious about having nearly equal representation when a venue is making, at least if a venue is supported by the state, you have to present a program that have a certain diversity in it, which means that you also have to actively book female musicians, and that goes for festivals also. So there's, I'll say, the politicians and people involved in music and art politics are consciously making actions to, and I think there are laws about it in Sweden and Norway also, to make it to make the venues and festivals represent that diversity that exists.
How would you describe the music scene in Europe as contrasted with the music scene in the United States and other parts of the world like Japan? How do you... Good question, eh?
Yeah, good question. A good thing in Europe is that it's it's pretty easy to get around with trains. It's easy to travel, Europe compared to the States. It's not different places and venues, festivals are not that far from each other. And that already makes it the traveling much easier. I must say, in the States, I have, of course, been playing a lot, actually, in New York. And then in bigger cities like Chicago and San Francisco or the Bay Area. I've also been touring along the East Coast and also in the Midwest and there's certain other places. And I think the audience in a lot of places, at least the audiences I met, have from the US, have been very curious and knowledgeable about many things in music. That has surprised me in a really nice way, being eager to talk and discuss and ask questions. And what can I say about Europe? There are lots of venues and festivals happening, and of course the many countries in Europe has some kind of cultural ministry, so it means that the state would often support venues and festivals. So there's a certain economy, you could say, which might make it easier. Japan is another story, but wonderful playing there. Wonderful, very exciting country. Wonderful audience also.
Okay. You never played with Ivo Perelman before, and playing with a musician for the first time is always a special event because you don't know the person. Yeah. So how was your experience playing with Ivo Perelman today? So
coming here today and meeting Ivo, who I have never played with before. I knew some of his music and I knew who Ivo was, of course. I was curious and open and excited to see how it would be. And I think it went really well. Very nice and very easy also, but not too easy, if you know what I mean. A lot of listening and a lot of, how can I say, good timing in terms of energy and changes in the music, and so it felt very dynamic, and I hope some of it is useful.
Great. There's one last question, because you didn't talk much about, and the Copenhagen Art Ensemble doesn't exist. You might not have much to say about this, but he asks, what made you decide to form such a large ensemble, the Copenhagen Art Ensemble?
The Copenhagen Art Ensemble was not, it was an orchestra, an ensemble that I and a trombone player who later started conducting, we in a way inherited it. It was already an ensemble, and it was called Jazz Group 90 or something. But we changed the name, and we also changed the, how can I say, the musical direction for that group into something maybe more, definitely more experimental.
There's one last one.
But I can also say I have formed two other larger groups. I have, in the later years, I formed some other large groups. One was called What River Ensemble, which is consisted of 8 people. Also recorded. It started as a commission I got for Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival in England, and that consisted of another musicians I haven't mentioned yet, which is a big mistake, which is Fred Friss, which I have worked a lot with in different constellations in the last, 10 years, I think. And that group was more, how can I say, in between new music and improvised music. Iko Emori is in that also, and Fred, as I said, mentioned. Chris Cutler, British drummer. Garth Knox, wonderful viola player from England or Scotland. And 2 Danish musicians, new music musicians or classical musicians, clarinet player and bass player. And who else? What's his name? Phil Minton is also in it. So, and then I've this year or the last 2 years I've been working with another new group, which has some Berlin musicians. Andrea Neumann, she's playing electronics, Burkhard Beins on percussion, and Marcin Kerbash, who is a trumpet player, and then Sten Sandell from Sweden, a violin player called Kat Hernandez. She's actually from the States, but she lives in Stockholm, and Nina Dehenny, she's a Swedish bass player. So that's also is also still improvised, but I'm also working with composition for these larger ensembles.